There's a quiet lie you've been absorbing for years. The belief that until you've got everything figured out, you shouldn't speak up, step forward, or try. That you need to be polished, prepared, and perfect before you're allowed to make a difference. But what if that belief is the very thing holding you back from doing what you're actually here to do? You've been chasing perfection like it's the ticket in. As if once you reach it, doors will open, people will listen, you'll finally feel enough. But perfection is a mirage. And deep down, you've started to notice it. How the closer you get, the more it moves. You revise your plan again. Wait for a better moment. Scroll past someone else's success and shrink a little more into yourself. You tell yourself it's not fear. It's being responsible, being realistic, being not quite ready. But listen, that hesitation, that paralysis, it doesn't come from lack of ability. It comes from a warped definition of worth. You've learned to equate being helpful with being flawless, being seen with being invulnerable. That if you're going to be taken seriously, you have to remove every crack, every mess, every insecurity. And that, it's exhausting, because it means you are always rehearsing and never arriving. Let's bring this closer. Think about one thing you've been putting off. Not because you don't want it, but because you're waiting to be better first. Maybe it's starting that podcast, applying for the job, reaching out to the person you admire, sharing your work. You tell yourself, once I get more experience, once I'm more confident, once I've cleaned this up a bit. But time isn't the issue. Readiness isn't the issue. The real issue is this. You've tied your sense of impact to an impossible standard, and as long as that tie remains, you'll keep pulling away from the edge of your own growth. Let's flip this. Try a thought experiment. Imagine a world where you never improve from this exact moment. No more training, no more healing, no more polish, just you, as is. And you still have to make a difference, still have to leave your mark. What would you do differently? How would you show up today if this version of you was already enough? It's not a comfortable exercise, but it's powerful because it shakes the foundation of the myth you've built your fear on. The myth that says being a work in progress disqualifies you from mattering right now. And that myth? It doesn't survive reality. Not when you look closely. Because in reality, the people who've shaped you most weren't perfect. Think about it. The teacher who believed in you, she stumbled sometimes. The friend who gave you the right words when you were breaking down, he didn't have all the answers. The stranger who showed unexpected kindness, you don't remember their resume. You remember how they made you feel. So if perfection wasn't required for them to matter to you, why do you assume it's required for you? Here's something even deeper. That drive for perfection, it's often rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen too closely. And fear, it wears many costumes. Sometimes it looks like procrastination. Sometimes it looks like over-researching. Sometimes it looks like relentless planning. But the core is always the same. If I'm not perfect, I'll be exposed, unloved, unworthy. But that fear, it's lying to you, not gently, boldly. Because what the world actually responds to, what people feel, is presence, intention, effort, the very things you already possess. You've just been trained to undervalue them. So here's your challenge. Write down one thing you've been holding back on because you think you're not there yet. Then ask yourself, if I gave myself permission to be imperfect, what's the next smallest step I could take today? Not the best step, not the most strategic step, just the next smallest one. Then take it. Because momentum doesn't come from mastery. It comes from the courage to begin, especially when beginning feels premature. That's how you break the myth. That's how you start making a difference. Before you're perfect, before you're sure, before you're ready. That's how you reclaim your power. You think the messiness means you're doing it wrong? That if something really mattered, it would come smoothly, confidently, without that pit in your stomach. But that's not how growth feels. Sometimes it looks like you fumbling through a dark room, knocking into fear, doubt, and resistance, and choosing to move anyway. You don't have to wait for the mess to clean itself up. You move through it. You've been sold the illusion that action must follow clarity, that unless you're confident, composed, and full of certainty, you should pause, wait, stay still. But clarity often follows movement. You discover who you are by walking, not waiting. Think back to a moment you actually moved through something tough. You didn't know all the answers when you started. Maybe you were scared out of your mind. Maybe your voice shook. Maybe you questioned yourself every step of the way. But you did it. And by doing it, you learned something you couldn't have known from the sidelines. That's the truth about imperfect action. It teaches you. It doesn't just reveal what's possible. It reveals you. Because courage doesn't wait for the fear to leave the room. It walks in anyway, with trembling hands and unfinished sentences. And maybe a plan that doesn't totally make sense, but it walks. This is where you shift from obsessing over outcomes to honoring movement. Imagine someone standing at the edge of a pool, analyzing the water. They want to swim. They've watched tutorials, read about technique, asked for tips, but they've never jumped in. Now imagine someone who cannonballs in, arms flailing, barely paddling at first, but they're in, and every awkward stroke teaches them something the observer can't feel. You've been standing at the edge long enough. Here's the real kicker. Most people aren't paying attention to your technique. They're watching your willingness. And more importantly, you feel different once you're in motion. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you're no longer stuck in your head, spinning endless what-ifs. So what happens when you allow yourself to move messy? You learn faster. You build evidence that your fear was inflated. You start building resilience, not because you avoided mistakes, but because you moved through them. Mistakes are not detours, they are the road. You stop trying to avoid every bump and start learning how to drive through the terrain. Think about this. What's the worst-case scenario you're afraid of? Write it out, name it, let it live on paper instead of in your body. Then answer this. What's the best-case scenario if you acted today? Flaws and all? That contrast, that space between worst and best, is where courage lives. Let me give you something practical, a tiny shift. Set a timer for 5 minutes. That's it. Pick the thing you've been avoiding because it doesn't feel ready. A project, a message, a decision. And do something toward it for 5 minutes. Not to finish it. Not to perfect it. Just to prove you can begin. You'll feel something open when you do this. Because action chips away at fear's illusion. Fear loves stillness. It grows in the shadows of later. But once you move, just a little, it loses its grip. You remember, oh right, I'm not powerless here. You're going to be awkward. You're going to question yourself. You'll probably cringe at your first draft, your first effort, your first attempt. That's how it's supposed to go. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're doing it honestly. Let's bring this down to a daily thought experiment. Tomorrow, as you move through your day, ask yourself, what would it look like to do this imperfectly, but with full presence? That question rewires everything, because suddenly, the goal isn't to impress, it's to engage. It's not to conquer, it's to contribute. It's not to appear flawless, it's to be real. You've been told that your mess disqualifies you. But the truth? The mess is often the most relatable part of you. It's where your humanity lives. It's what invites others to feel safe around you. So stop bracing for the perfect moment. Start trusting the imperfect one. Every time you choose motion over fear, you prove to yourself that growth isn't about polish. It's about participation. You may think that your imperfections are barriers. Things to fix, hide, or overcome before you're allowed to show up. But to someone else, those same imperfections might be the very thing that helps them breathe easier, feel less alone, and find their own courage. Your realness is not a flaw. It's a bridge. When you stop trying to impress and start trying to connect, something shifts. People don't bond over perfection. They bond over shared struggle, unspoken doubts, familiar fears. You've felt this. Someone admits something you've been carrying silently, and suddenly, the air in the room changes. There's relief, resonance, a sense that maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one figuring things out as you go. This is where your power lives, not in the image you project, but in the truth you embody. Think about someone you admire, really admire, not for their achievements, but for their presence, their steadiness, their ability to make you feel seen. Chances are, they weren't perfect. They were just present, open, willing to be a little messy if it meant being honest. That's the ripple effect of realness. Every time you share your story before it's neatly wrapped in a bow, every time you ask a question instead of pretending to have answers, every time you say me too instead of I already knew that, you create space. And in that space, other people remember that it's okay to be themselves too. That's how impact works. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers through shared experience, through subtle shifts in the way someone holds themselves after you've spoken, through the text you'll never see that says, I listened to her and felt less alone. So ask yourself this, what am I hiding that might actually be helpful? Not because you owe anyone your vulnerability. You don't. But because there's freedom in realizing that your value doesn't come from being untouchable. It comes from being real. And when you're real, you give other people permission to do the same. Let's bring this into a scenario. You're sitting in a meeting, or on a video call, or at a dinner table. Someone is struggling out loud, maybe with work, with doubt, with parenting, with motivation. The old you might nod politely, smile, stay quiet. But the braver you, the real you offer a moment of truth. Yeah, I've been there. Actually, I'm still kind of there. You don't offer a solution, you offer yourself. And in that moment, the ground shifts. They breathe. You breathe. That tension eases. And maybe you've done more good than any advice ever could. That's the kind of difference that doesn't show up on a resume, but it changes lives. Here's a journal prompt to sit with. What parts of myself do I assume are unhelpful, but might actually be someone else's relief? Maybe it's your anxiety, your chronic overthinking, your non-linear career path, the fact that you start things and don't always finish them, the fact that you feel deeply, the fact that you've doubted yourself. These aren't shameful, they're relatable. And relatability is a superpower. Because here's the truth. No one is inspired by your perfection. They're inspired by your return, by your resilience, by your openness, by the fact that you keep showing up, warts, wounds, and all. This doesn't mean spilling your soul everywhere. It doesn't mean romanticizing your pain or performing your vulnerability. It means telling the truth, quietly, simply, and with care. There's dignity in that. There's also this. People remember how you made them feel far more than they remember what you said. And if what they feel is, I'm not broken for struggling, that's impact. You don't need to be perfect to inspire someone. You just need to be visible in your trying, present in your imperfection, willing to take up space as you are. You might never know the full ripple of your realness, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. The world doesn't need more polished versions of people pretending they're fine. It needs you, honest, growing, figuring it out as you go. That's where the real difference begins. It's easy to think that making a difference has to look dramatic, public, grand, newsworthy. But the most powerful moments often begin quietly, in the smallest acts of courage. The decision to try, to speak, to get back up. One small brave thing, done before you feel ready, can alter everything. You've been waiting for the big sign, the breakthrough, the right alignment of timing, confidence, and clarity. But life doesn't usually come that way. It moves through nudges, whispers, gut-level urges that tell you, do this one little thing, even if you don't feel ready. Especially if you don't feel ready. And when you listen to that whisper, When you take that one small, brave action, that's when things begin to shift. Maybe the action is sending the email, or applying to the thing you think you're underqualified for, or saying, "I'm struggling" to someone who matters. Maybe it's setting a boundary, or forgiving yourself, or putting your name on your art. It doesn't have to be loud, but it has to be real. Because courage isn't a mood, it's emotion, a decision made not in the absence of fear, but in spite of it. Here's a question to carry with you. What would I do if I didn't need to get it perfect? Only true. That's a compass. It doesn't point you toward applause. It points you toward alignment. Let's look at a real-world scenario. You're staring at your screen, trying to write a message, maybe an outreach, maybe a caption, maybe an answer to someone waiting. You overthink every word. You second-guess. You delete. You rewrite. But beneath all of it is this pulse. Just say it. Say it as you. So you pause, you breathe, you write the thing from a place of truth instead of performance, and you hit send. You just did the small brave thing. That might feel ordinary to someone else, but to you, that's movement. That's everything. And here's what's wild. Sometimes the person on the other side doesn't even respond the way you hoped. But even then, you changed. You taught yourself that you can act in alignment, even when you're not guaranteed a payoff. That's real power. Let's try a physical anchor for this. Stand up, literally. Wherever you are, stand. Take one step forward, just one. Feel the shift in your balance. You're not sprinting, you're not performing, but you've moved. Now sit down again and ask yourself, what would that step be for my life right now? You'll know it. You've probably known it for a while. But that voice in your head, your internal perfectionist, has been telling you, not yet. Not until you're more certain, more polished, more practiced. That voice will never run out of reasons to wait. So here's your work. Do the small brave thing anyway. Before you feel completely prepared, before you're sure, before it's easy. Because that's what bravery looks like. Not absence of doubt, but movement through it. Here's a journaling prompt. What's one thing I keep imagining myself doing someday? What's one 5-minute version of that I could do today? You don't have to leap. You just have to lean a little closer to the life that's calling you. Because the truth is, most breakthroughs start before you're ready. You reach out, and the path unfolds after. You open your mouth, and the words come as you speak. You move, and the confidence follows. Courage isn't a quality you earn. It's a practice you repeat. And every time you repeat it, even in tiny doses, you build something bigger than confidence. You build trust, not just in the world, but in yourself. That trust? That's what keeps the momentum going when perfection fails you, when plans unravel, when your image cracks. So no, you don't have to be bold all the time. You don't have to perform your bravery. You just have to keep asking, what is one small brave thing I can do today? And then do it. Not for approval, not for proof, but for the simple truth that action shapes you, and you are worth shaping. You've been taught that making a difference is something distant, something reserved for experts, leaders, or the extraordinary. But what if it's something much more subtle? Something you're already doing, in the way you listen, show up, and try. You don't need a title to matter, you need presence. What if mattering doesn't look like standing on a stage or having your name in lights? What if it looks like being the person who follows through, who offers a quiet kind of consistency, who shows up, not with answers, but with attention? You've been measuring yourself against a false metric, thinking that to make a real impact, your life must look a certain way, loud, polished, impressive. But that's not how meaning works. That's not how people feel seen, changed, or moved. They feel it through presence, through sincerity, through the invisible ways you choose to show up when no one's watching. So let's talk about what it really means to matter. It's not about being better than others. It's not about visibility. It's not even about how many people you influence. It's about the depth of your presence in the moments you choose to live with intention. It's in the way you treat the cashier when you're late, The way you check in on your friend, even when you're tired. The way you keep a small promise you made to yourself a week ago, even when no one would know if you didn't. That's where it lives, your power to make a difference. You've been taught to think of value as a destination. But what if value is already inside you, waiting to be expressed, not proven? Here's a visual thought experiment. Imagine your daily life as a film, but without any sound, no narration, no text overlays, just the movement of you through your day. What would someone watching that film notice? Where would they see kindness, effort, heart? What would your body language say about what matters to you? Because the difference you make is often quiet. It's not in the dramatic gesture. It's in the small moments when you choose to lean into love, even if it costs you comfort. You make a real difference when you choose presence over performance. You make a real difference when you choose listening over proving. You make a real difference when you let your flawed, human, unfinished self still move toward purpose. This is your invitation to redefine what it means to be impactful. Not perfect, present. Not impressive, connected. Not flawless, faithful. Because the world doesn't need more people chasing external validation. It needs people who are brave enough to live from the inside out, to ask themselves, what matters to me? And then to let their choices reflect that answer, day after day, even in the tiniest of ways. Here's a final practical tool, a one-line check-in. Ask yourself at the end of each day, did I move in alignment with what I value today, even a little? That's it. No grading, no judgment, just a gentle tracking of what it means to be in process. Because that's what you are, in process. And that's enough. You don't have to wait for transformation to begin making a difference. You already have the raw material, your experiences, your failures, your perspective, your heart. That's the toolkit. That's what makes you human. That's what makes you capable. So, if you've been waiting for permission to matter, to step into your place in the world without having to be the best, the brightest, or the most polished, this is it. No more waiting. You matter not because you're perfect. You matter because you're here. Still trying, still caring, still showing up. And that's enough to make a real difference. So take a breath now. Let the pace slow. You don't have to rush towards some imagined version of who you should be. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're becoming, day by day, moment by moment, through all the imperfect, beautiful ways you show up for yourself and others. Growth isn't a finish line. It's a lived process, messy, courageous, human. And in every imperfect moment of presence, you're already creating more meaning than you realize. More than enough. Always enough. You are allowed to be both unfinished and impactful. You already are.